Greetings, Don Galenkwa, Dr. Joseph Martin. Poundmaker. Pihtokahanapiwiyin is his true name in Plains Cree language, and he was a very famous Plains Cree chief, peacemaker, and defender of his people. He was born sometime around 1842 in what is now Battleford, Saskatchewan, Canada, and he died of a lung hemorrhage on July the 4th in 1886. As always, when I share the stories of the lives of these great Native spiritual masters and teachers and chiefs, I don't focus on the historical part, which you can find in many books in schools and, of course, in your libraries. I focus on the qualities of the man. And what we find in the Peacemaker of the Plains Cree is a good name for him, Poundmaker. What do we know about Poundmaker? Well, he was born in the area near Battleford, Saskatchewan, which back then was Rupert's Land. And his father was a well-loved Assiniboine medicine man, and his mother was a mixed Plains Cree woman. And shortly after his sister and brother were born, both their parents died. And then Poundmaker and his brother and sister were raised on the Red Pheasant Native community with the chief Wootani. Now, Poundmaker was a very tall, elegant, thin, boned man, very quiet and yet very strong. As you know, mostly people who have the greatest power are very quiet and very solitary and very reflective. And such a young man was Poundmaker. He seemed to be a leader and even an elder at his very early years as a teenager even. This was a time of great turmoil, of course, on Turtle Island, certainly in Canada as well. The Confederation had already happened in 1867. These territories, though, were yet to be made part of Canada. The Treaty 6 was trying to be made between the government, the military on one side, and the First Nations, the Cree, Assiniboine, and many other tribes of the plains on the other side, including the circa or the Blackfeet. Now, it was very clear to Poundmaker, who was quite an intelligent young man, that the treaties were false, and whatever treaties were promised, nothing ever came to fruition as a result. Neither the respect, the responsibility, the use of the land, the sharing of the animals and the lands and the people's food, all this seemed to be taken away from them more and more all the time. This was a time, of course, when the great buffalo were diminishing in their numbers in the herds as they were being decimated down in America and South and North Dakota, and also up in the Plains territories of Saskatchewan and Alberta. So, nevertheless, even though he was despondent and was seeking justice and peace with the white people who were coming across and, in a way, I guess, transgressing the territory of the traditional First Nations of the land who had been there for many tens of thousands of years, Poundmaker always kept the peace within himself and within his community. And it was for this reason that he was elected or selected as a peace chief. In 1873, he was actually adopted by Crowfoot, who is a very well-known Canadian Siksika or Blackfoot chief, and you can find many wonderful stories about Crowfoot as well, and songs about him. How did Poundmaker get his name? His name, Pihtokahanapiwiyin, means he who keeps the buffaloes or brings the buffaloes into the pound. And it is said that he was very young when he had his initiation through his vision quest at around the age of 11, in fact, for him, that he was given a power song, a buffalo power song by Dendreah, the white buffalo woman. It's undoubtedly that she herself gave him from Spirit the buffalo power song to sing that would find the matriarch of the buffalo herd, and he would sing to her, and she would lead all her young people, her young calves, into the pound that was made out of grass and thatch and so on, and would offer as a sacrifice the lives of some of the buffalo for the welfare and the food of the Cree. During this time, in the late 1870s into the early 1880s, it was a time when many of the buffalo were decimated and, of course, gone, and the people were starving, in fact, greatly starving. This is only 130 years ago, and one needs to remember that this is just a short time ago. And so, with the help of Crowfoot and Poundmaker joining their tribes together, along with the Assiniboine peoples, they were trying to share all the food and resources on their traditional territories and lands. Nevertheless, there was a lot of rebellion going on at this time, as you're well aware, if you're Canadian history, that the rebellion, the Louis Riel rebellion, was happening in the 1880s. And the final rebellion happened in 1885 when Louis Riel was taken and put in jail for treason. And eventually, as you know, he was murdered by the Canadian government. During this time, Louis Riel had mentioned in something that he was writing that Poundmaker was involved in some kind of information around the Louis Riel rebellion. Nothing could be farther from the truth. All this has been healed between Poundmaker and Louis Riel. Nevertheless, it's true to say that Poundmaker always kept the peace. In March the 30th, 1885, he took all his people from northern Saskatchewan, what is now northern Saskatchewan, including all the Plains Cree and all the Assiniboine peoples, and they walked to the Fort Battleford, which is now North Battleford, Saskatchewan. And all the white townspeople were so scared of the numbers of the natives that were there, including the elders, the grandmothers, the children, the dogs, and the babies, and so on. But nevertheless, the white people were quite scared, and they left the town, and they holed themselves up inside the fort. And even though Poundmaker was very peaceable and just waiting for them to come out to speak, and he was going to ask them about food and other things that have been agreed to in the Treaty 6 of 1876, they didn't come out for 2 days. And during that time, when the people, the governor, the person there, and the military man did not come out, the white people were known to have been looting the town. Nevertheless, as is the case today, unfortunately, it was the natives who got blamed for this. And Poundmaker just moved away, walked away with his people back to Cut Knife Hill, and left the fort and left the town, never having been able to speak with the people who were in charge there. So a few months later, on May the 2nd of 1885, 332 Canadian military men and police went to Cut Knife Hill to apprehend Poundmaker for treason, as now Louis Riel had been also put in jail. The army was not successful. They had to eventually, after fighting for a bit, have to retreat. During this time, Poundmaker had never even been involved in the battle there at all, and in fact had, from the sidelines, been trying to keep the peace between all the peoples and, of course, the white peoples who were attacking. Unfortunately for him, though, he was taken to a place where he was put on trial, at the same trial as Louis Riel, in fact. And there are photos that we can see at the Allen Sapp Museum in North Battleford of that trial and many other places in Alberta, where you have photographs of the actual trial of Poundmaker sitting in the dock. He was convicted of treason for no good reason other than the fact that his name had been mentioned in a letter that Louis Riel had written. So I'd like to read to you the actual words that were transcribed from the Plains Cree by the people there, the English people and the other agents who were half native, who wrote this down, and I'll say it in English. And this is what Poundmaker said in his defense at the trial in 1885. Everything that is bad has been laid against me this summer. There is nothing of it that is true. Had I wanted war, I would not be here now. I should be on the prairie. You did not catch me. I gave myself up. You have got me because I wanted justice and peace. And he was sentenced to 3 years in prison in Stony Mountain Penitentiary because of his adopted father, Crowfoot, the Siksika great chief. His hair was not cut while he was in prison, and he only stayed there for 7 months. Apart from that, one of the reasons he had to be taken out of this very stone cold, freezing cold, inhospitable penitentiary was that he was suffering from a great lung infection and a deep illness. And he did die actually on July the 4th in 1886 from a lung hemorrhage, having been in prison, which caused the lung hemorrhage. Now, this is a most important story, not only for all the First Nations here in Karnataka or Canada, but also for all the First Nations on Turtle Island, and indeed worldwide on all the 7 continents. And mostly for the Canadian people, the white people and their descendants who have been here for 300 or 400 or 500 years, all the new Canadian immigrants who are here, some for only a few months and some for maybe a few years or decades or generations. Saskatchewan, the Plains Cree, happen to be living geographically right in the very middle of Canada. From the east coast to the west coast, Saskatchewan is in the middle of our country. And what I would like to share with you and hopefully inspire all of you who listen to this is that we are now in 2014 in the early parts of the 21st century needing something very desperately in order for our country to survive and our people to remain as united people. And that would be the re-indigenization of the consciousness of everyone in Karnataka or Canada. And that means not just the First Nations and the young First Nations who are here with us now in this good red road earth walk, but all Canadians need to learn of the history and the historical, psychological, spiritual foundation of our country as being the First Nations themselves who have been here for up to 130,000 years. So Poundmaker himself, as a great peace chief and defender of his people and the land and all our relations, or all our animal friends, Miitukuyoyatsin if you like, is a highly esteemed person who should be spoken of greatly in the history of our country now and in the future, as someone who tried to keep the peace, but there was a lot of lies and treason on the part of the Canadian government in terms of broken promises and broken treaties. This we know from history. All the history books show this and prove this. The key then is this: in your heart, as you move your consciousness to truth and reconciliation, and this is in an allegory again in conjunction with what the Canadian government has been trying to do for the last 3 or 5 years, based on the truth and reconciliation about all the degradation and the abuse that was suffered by the First Nations peoples when they were put in church schools and other kind of government schools. There's something even deeper here that we're looking at. The fact is that there needs to be peace, truth, righteousness, and true power of unity of the hearts of all the people in Canada. If we are going to survive as a nation into the 21st and 22nd centuries, we must realize that the First Nations have stood their ground with integrity and honesty and tried to keep the peace as much as they possibly could. Ever since that time, and even before that time, and all the way up to 1970 with the war in Oka, that was again the grandmothers and the children trying to keep the peace and the sacred nature of the First Nations Mohawk graveyard and the bones of our ancestors. I hope that you will sincerely, deeply reflect on all of this. Chief Poundmaker, this great peacemaker, is a soul, and his spirit still lives within us all now. I myself had the great experience of working directly with his grandnephew, Ernest Tutusas, in the 1970s in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and learned many of the great medicine ways of the Cree, the Plains Cree natives, all the great medicines that can benefit us still now here. Blessings to all the ancestors of the Plains Cree and the spirit of Poundmaker. And may all the blessings come through to you in this video, and all blessings to you as we say Skanagoa, the peace is great, and your heart will keep the peace as you hold to the unity of all sisters and brothers. Pihtokahanapiwiyin, Skanagoa, Dr. Joseph Martin.